All right, so I got a clip here for you guys of former President Barack Obama sitting down and doing an interview with Hassan Minhaj, where they're going to get into sort of his concept of progress here in the United States, specifically relating to the issue of climate change. So this one is honestly just amazing because it's perfectly emblematic of who Barack Obama was as a president, just sort of like a neoliberal, middle of the road, like milquetoast sellout kind of guy who believes in like very incremental progress or even like borderline stagnation, as opposed to the sort of like hope and change agenda he was initially running on and captured the minds of a lot of young people at the time. So let's just go ahead and jump into this real quick.
Malia comes to me, she says, you know what, she's 24, all our friends, sometimes we talk about climate change and we just feel like there is no way we're gonna be able to solve this. We're looking at the science. It feels as if we're on a trajectory that we're going to sail past this 2 degrees centigrade benchmark, where after that, potentially things are getting cataclysmic. And so I'll be honest with you, Dad, a lot of my friends, they just feel as if, what's the point? Because the world's burning and there's nothing I can do. And I said to her, well, she asked me, what should I say to them?
Right.
And what I said to her is, look, we may not be able to cap temperature rise to 2 degrees centigrade. But here's the thing, if we work really hard, we may be able to cap it at 2.5 instead of 3. Or 3 instead of 3.5. That extra centigrade, that might mean the difference between whether Bangladesh is underwater.
Right.
It might make the difference as to whether, 100 million people have to migrate,
right,
or only a few.
Right. And these incremental changes
that matters.
Yeah, I see what
it makes a difference.
Sure.
And
it's
to be
worth
able,
fighting for. And
it's worth fighting
and you
for.
can't descend into nihilism and not try to save those 100, 200, 300 million people. It matters.
That's a lot of
I
people.
agree with it. Yeah, that's a lot.
Okay. So there's a lot to say about this. First off, Obama keeps doing this, and I don't know why. I mean, maybe some people still want to hear what he has to say, but honestly, it just pisses me off seeing him like crop up every once in a while and do these interviews where it's sort of like he's talking as if he wasn't the most powerful person, not only in the country, but on the face of the planet for 8 years, and then he wants to turn around and talk about like political nihilism. And it's like, there's a huge reason, and you are a huge reason why a lot of younger people especially are super nihilistic about the state of American politics or about an issue like climate change. You were the president for 2 full terms where you could have meaningfully addressed that and talk about like the window from 2008 to 2016. I mean, that would have been, a perfect time to do something huge and bold and actually take on the power of the fossil fuel industry and make some sort of dramatic shift away from fossil fuels and towards renewable energy. You did not do that shit. Okay. And so now you're turning around and you're saying we should be what? Happy that we're striving for prevention of like the most cataclysmic, the most apocalyptic climate result. I mean, it's like, yeah, sure, on the margins, that is stuff we should be fighting for, but that's not good enough, right? And he references like Bangladesh being underwater, which is kind of like underselling the reality of what that 2 degrees threshold means, or the current trajectory that we're on, which is probably going to far surpass that 2 degrees threshold. It's kind of underselling a lot of the consequences, and that's also something that bothers me just generally about the climate change discussion. Is it's like people sort of, their immediate reaction is just to think of like sea level rise, but it's like it's a whole host of other issues as well, right? It is, yes, sea level rise, but it's also like higher frequency and intensity of a lot of different types of storms. It's also the increased likelihood of different diseases spreading to new locations because different species and different types of insects and other things that carry diseases are able to go to new places and new environments that they previously otherwise wouldn't have been. As you pointed out there, mass migration of millions or tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of people as certain parts of like places like the Middle East, for example, or other low-lying areas become uninhabitable. So we're talking about all of these different sort of conflicts that are going to be brewing over that. Resource scarcity, food scarcity, water scarcity. I mean, all of these different things, but he's just sort of like talking about it as if like, well, yeah, but the world is not literally going to light on fire, so let's keep believing in the system and believe in progress as he sees it. Now, it's especially ironic, specifically on the climate change thing, because again, you were the president, and what were you doing as the president? Well, let's hear it directly from Obama himself, as pointed out here by Ben Norton.
You know, I know we're an oil country, and we need American energy, and by the way, American energy production. You wouldn't always know it, but you know, it went up every year I was president. And you know, that whole suddenly America's like the biggest oil producer and the biggest that was me, people. I just want you to
Okay, so I mean, there he is, directly admitting to assisting in the worsening, the perpetuation of the status quo to worsen where we were on climate change. Now, he did do some other things, right? You know, Paris Climate Accords, shit like that. Even that, I mean, I wouldn't give him too much credit on, because it's like a really non-binding agreement that was put in place. The U.S. under Trump later pulls out of it. You know, it becomes like a disaster where none of the countries are actually hitting the benchmarks that they promised in the original goals, and even those goals weren't necessarily good enough to prevent a lot of these consequences. So it's like, again, what he just said there in that clip is just the perfect embodiment, right? It's just half-assed, half measures, right? He's not really trying to confront the underlying systems, the underlying power structures within this country and around the world that would be required to confront in order to address an issue that is a global, you know, massive issue like this, like climate change, right? He's not willing to go after those power centers. He just wants to sort of like maybe tilt the, you know, needle marginally in the right direction. But even on that, again, I mean, shit like this here from CNN Business back from 2016, sort of just doing like a roundup of Obama's, you know, climate policies, I guess, or his oil policies and energy policies broadly. They say here, America's biggest oil boom, as he just pointed out there, came under Obama. So they do give a little bit of nuance here. You can see the graph, you can see how it sort of skyrockets, and then obviously ending here in April of 2016. And then they give a synopsis. They say, Obama, friend or foe of oil. Energy experts argue Obama's policies overall have neither been a positive nor a negative for oil production. Okay, well, already on that, you get a grade of an F. Okay, because again, we're talking about a massive civilization, global, you know, civilization adjusting or altering type of phenomenon with climate change. And you know, these energy experts are saying it was neither positive nor negative. Okay, well, it has to be negative for the fossil fuel industry in order for us to adequately shift away from our fossil fuel reliance and towards more sustainable methods. Okay, it has to be in that direction, but they're saying it was kind of a wash, right? He wasn't as bad as somebody like George W. Bush, you know, wasn't as good as maybe he could have potentially been. But again, this is the hole that you have dug for us. I mean, this is what your administration produced. They continue here. They say Obama did place some restrictions on fracking, though he hasn't moved to ban the controversial tactic as Senator Bernie Sanders and other environmentalists want. In fact, fracking now accounts for half of all U.S. oil output. Obviously, fracking has a whole host of other different associated environmental consequences with that as well. They say the White House did place a temporary moratorium on the Gulf of Mexico drilling after Deepwater Horizon's disaster. However, drilling in the Gulf of Mexico has rebounded and is on track to break a record next year. They say, on the other hand, under Obama and the GOP-led Congress, which again is something similar to Joe Biden, insisting that we reach across the aisle and try to work with, like, you know, conservative majorities and things like that to do disastrous policy like this. They say the U.S. also removed the 40-year ban on crude oil exports, potentially allowing production to increase once prices rise. And again, that's exactly what he was just talking about in that clip. Okay, so this is who you are, Obama, right? And you can apply this to so many different issues, right? Healthcare is another one. Again, ran his campaign in 2008, energized young people, energized the country, hope and change. After the 2008 financial crash, we are going to bring about real structural reforms that are needed at that moment in time. Turns around and something like the healthcare industry completely broken, hundreds of thousands of Americans, you know, being saddled by medical debt, going into medical bankruptcy. You know, people can't afford to keep their prescriptions on a regular basis. People are being, you know, drowned by this healthcare system where you have this corrupt middleman standing in the way of you and your healthcare with these giant multi-billion-dollar insurance companies and all of that. And instead of actually trying to push for something like Medicare for all, as was advocated by somebody like Bernie Sanders, he chooses to do Obamacare, which was largely just a handout to those same insurance companies, and so you could give him credit, slight credit, and be like, well, he got, people more healthcare, technically, right? Okay, but at the same time, you didn't actually address a fundamental issue. Same exact thing with climate change, as he was just admitting there. Now, where are we at with climate change right now? Well, he just referenced the 2 degrees Celsius goal to sort of keep it under that relative to pre-industrial levels. They say here from Vox, 2 degrees, the world set a simple goal for climate change. We are likely to miss it, and they point out here that we are basically likely to skyrocket past that 2 degrees goal. And again, I mean, even with somebody like Joe Biden, who was obviously Obama's vice president, now the president of the United States, I mean, it's not as if Biden did anything serious to address climate change either. And it's especially even worse now, given the fact that the window of time where we could do something serious to mitigate some of those, catastrophic consequences that Obama was just referencing there, that window is shrinking, okay? Especially as Biden is getting up into age. It's by no means any guarantee he's going to win the next election. We could end up with a Republican who's going to, run full speed into the fossil fuels once again. So the window of time to act on this was like, it's already passed at this point. I mean, we have maybe the next 10 years, if you want to be super generous, to like completely try to transform our energy system. Biden didn't even like pretend to try to do that, right? The best that we got out of the Biden administration so far was the Inflation Reduction Act, which, oh, by the way, was largely dictated by a literal fossil fuel millionaire coal baron from West Virginia named Joe Manchin, who Joe Biden just allowed to curb stomp his entire agenda and then end up having massive sway when it came to his climate policy. Okay, so I mean, again, we're still not addressing this issue, and Obama's like, well, we should be happy that I guess like some countries aren't going to be completely underwater. Okay, another perspective here from the AP, and this just happened last week. For the third time this week, okay, third time in 1 week, and I think it actually got up to 4 in a week, Earth sets an unofficial heat record, okay? So they point out here, Earth's average temperature set a new unofficial record high on Thursday, the third such milestone in a week that has already rated as the hottest on record, and what one prominent scientist said could be the hottest in 120,000 years, okay? So things are not going too well, to say the least. Now, I want to finish off here just with this article that I will link down in the description. Highly recommend it. It was a good read. It was written by this guy who was a long time, like multi-decade long weather forecaster, and he did this massive breakdown here where he's putting into perspective some of the more alarming sort of like alarm bells that we have been getting recently, especially this year in particular, as you can see from some of these graphs here. And he basically just lays it out. He doesn't just go full speed and say this every single hurricane that happens is 100% due to climate change or anything like that. It's a very nuanced article, gets into all of the details that you need to know about. But I mean, you can see here like North Atlantic sea surface temperature skyrocketing in 2023. Part of that has to do with some of the normal sort of cyclical weather patterns that happen during this time of year, but obviously it's a lot more than that. So you can go and check it out for yourself. Again, link down in the description. But I mean, just going back just to finish off on the Obama aspect of it, again, he talks about nihilism and how young people are sort of like more and more giving up on the electoral process because it's just not delivering on any of these things. I mean, that's not our fault, right? It doesn't mean anything to just sit there and finger wag at young people, or anybody for that matter, who has a nihilistic approach to politics right now. It is your fault. You guys are the ones who instilled that in us, whether it's, Hillary Clinton, whether it's Obama, whether it's even Joe Biden now. I mean, you are the people who are not taking these issues seriously enough, whether it's on healthcare policy, whether it's on education policy, especially with student debt recently being struck down. Even Biden's like, again, once a half measured, means tested student debt forgiveness plan that gets thrown out of the window. We have a record low faith in our institutions here in the US, whether it's on climate change, whether it's on any of these different issues. It is our political system, it is our economic system of capitalism and politicians who are corrupted by the capitalist sector, by these billionaires and by corporate America. That is what is making people lose faith in our institutions, right? That is what is making people turn into this nihilistic approach. So the remedy for that, again, isn't trying to be like, well, you should be happy that Bangladesh isn't going to be underwater. Maybe, okay? The actual solution to that would be push for aggressive reforms, right? We need something like the Green New Deal that is a total economic overhaul in order to revitalize our, infrastructure, in order to make actual investments in renewable energy for the future. And that's something that could be even economically beneficial. I mean, this is an emerging industry that is going to be invested invested in. This is something that is going to be a massive global thing for the foreseeable future. So, I mean, it's not even as if like this is a negative economically, right? Not to mention the disastrous economic outcomes that will come as a result of all of these effects of climate change. So, I mean, I'll leave it at that. Obviously, it's not surprising coming from somebody like Obama, just kind of garbage, useless, vague platitude advice coming from him. And honestly, again, very much wish that Obama would sort of just like go enjoy his millions that he's made post presidency and in his retirement, and just sort of like shut the fuck up.
Everyone is saying GoodPoliticGuy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying